Correctional Services Commissioner Fraser overruled a recommendation that former President Jacob Zuma should not be granted medical parole. Fraser made the startling admission in an SABC interview last night amid opposition parties and lobby groups seeking a review of this very decision. Now, Zuma was granted parole on Sunday. The former parole board member, Dr. Angelique Coetzee, joins us now to talk to us about the process of obtaining medical parole by an inmate. Doc, a very good morning to you. Before we get into the nitty-gritties, should South Africans have reason to be suspicious about the process that has been followed to grant the former president, Jacob Zuma, or to perhaps place him on medical parole?
Thank you, Chloe, and good morning to everyone. I think what needs to be prudent is to have trust in the process, and the process is not open and transparent at this stage. And therefore, the way that it happened, I think there's questions can be asked around it. There is a process, except if that process has been changed the past few years, and it needs to be open and transparent.
When you say there needs to be transparency, what is it that was supposed to have been done that has not been done?
So we dealt in my time with two very prominent cases. One was the Celebi case, and the other was the case of W. Lewis. And what we did is we went, and because it's high-profile cases, and we know that there will be a lot of questions, we physically examined them. We were a team of two, at least assigned to that. And then we also spoke with the press afterwards to make it an open and transparent process, because if you don't do anything like that, there's a lot of conspiracy theories going around. People doesn't trust the process. Unfortunately, you cannot hide if you are examining in a high-profile case. You have to be open to the public out there and take responsibility.
Yeah. Dr. Coetzee, the process, in fact, from the moment that former President Jacob Zuma was incarcerated, the understanding is that he would have gone into the medical wing of the correctional center, and for the duration of his stay there, it then was in a very short space of time that we are then told that he has been moved to a private hospital outside of the prison. In fact, this morning, we're reading a story on the Sowetan that talks about how the Correctional Services now has a bill of close to 400,000, which is as a direct result of the former president having been hospitalized in a private health institution. My basic question is, how uncomfortable would his stay have been? I'm still dealing with the basics here.
So it's difficult as I don't have any background on this specific case, but as a rule, what needs to happen if you are not on a medical scheme or a private medical fund, you would then either go through the Provincial Department of Health. In the case of a former president, they will normally be treated by the military, by the SAMs, so they would have been referred to the SAMs as per my knowledge. And if you are on a medical scheme, then you can go and get your private doctors, and then that needed to be covered under the medical schemes. So I can't comment on the specific case, unfortunately.
Yeah, and totally understand that, Doctor, because the understanding that we have as well is that former President Jacob Zuma would be ordinarily a patient of the military health officials. But let's move on. Let's talk now about the role of the head of the correctional facility. In this instance, this would be escort. Would that person have any role to play whatsoever in a decision to place an inmate on medical parole?
So, except if anything changed since my time, what needs to be done is if you have been incarcerated while you were suffering from a disease, you cannot use that disease to say, to claim and say, I'm very sick and therefore I need to go on to medical parole, because while that incident took place or the offense took place, the feeling is that you were already sick then, and therefore you're not eligible for medical parole. So we will normally look at a patient that is extremely ill, terminally ill, or end stage, or a patient that would suffer from, because of his chronic illnesses or disease, is putting a burden onto the facility, and they cannot help and treat him medically there. And you then look at would there be any, if this patient has been granted medical parole, would he then be able to recover? And that's why we use end stage, the term end stage. So if you are able to recover, then you would not be eligible, it will be much more difficult. So yes, you as a parole or the inmate can ask to look, to get medical parole, or your lawyers can do that. But it normally goes through the process of the medical parole board.
Yeah. So I think what you're explaining here, Doctor, is the inmate who perhaps would be asking for medical parole, asking to be granted medical parole. In this instance, the interview yesterday that was done with Arthur Fraser, he talks at some point about how the head of the facility in Escort, which is where the former president has been incarcerated, having been part of this decision to grant the former president medical parole. Now, I'm asking specifically about the head of the prison being part of that process. Is this normal?